Welcome everyone back to weekly weather updates, and today we're going to have a look at the GFS, the GM, the ECMWF and the UK Met Office runs. Now currently we've actually got quite a big area of snow over northern England. It's been quite localised, and the reason for it is it's basically North Sea convection. However, the wind direction wasn't quite as it was forecast. It was forecast to move more south, sort of northeast to south west, whereas it went more east to west. So what happens is parts of northern England, so especially North Yorkshire, and going up to the northeast, just got constant snow coming off the North Sea today. We've seen potentially good 4, 5, 6 inches of snow up there. It's very localised. I mean, especially over higher ground. Not particularly populated areas either. However, there are some very nice images going around of very deep snowfall compared to most of the country where we've got absolutely nothing. There's a few snow flurries around elsewhere, but it does look like our snow chances will be diminishing, at least for the next probably week. Beyond that, however, they could either continually be diminished or they could substantially increase, and we're going to have a look at that today. So as we run through the model, you can see this sort of high pressure topples over the top of the country, and it's really what happens with this high pressure in the long term. We know it's got decent strength, and there's a chance of some higher pressure building to our north as well, maybe pulling in a bit of a colder northerly wind. Look at the upper airs. The cold there's the pool of cold air there is cold, but it's not going to be bitterly colder if we do start to pull in that bit of a northerly wind. Maybe a few wintry showers if that develops. It does look like we do put a bit of a northerly wind in on Tuesday. Beyond that, we maintain sort of a northerly flow, but it's more high pressure dominant, and maybe further north we might get more westerly winds, bringing milder air, with it being more dry and dry, settled, and more frosty in the south as well. Beyond that, really what happens with this area of high pressure. We've got a pocket of high pressure to our north. We've got the southern stratospheric warming coming through the atmosphere. So it's really, if we see this all connect together, that's when we could start to see some very cold conditions. At the moment, some of the models are getting some of it connected together, but not all the models are going for one solution yet. As we'll run through the GFS, you'll see what the GFS sort of goes for. This area of high pressure to our north sort of diminishes before the area of high pressure to our south tries to reach further north. Now, if we did get some support from the sun stratospheric warming, we could start to build high pressure towards Greenland. And that starts to happen on this run. We start to build down a bit more of a northerly wind. However, it doesn't fully block out the Atlantic. And you see, we do start to get Greenland blocking. And if we could sustain that Greenland blocking and make it a bit larger, we'd start to pull down bitterly cold northeasterly winds from this extremely cold pool just to the north of Scandinavia. But instead, because it's not completely dominating the weather, this is just after day 10, remember, so it's not particularly reliable, but it's coming towards a more reliable time frame. Well, I can tell you it's not reliable, considering most of the models are not going for this, but anyway, the Atlantic is still pretty strong. It's further south, so further north we do have colder air in place. You can see generally quite cold air to our north, and very cold to our northeast. And if we could just get this high pressure to block a bit more, we would be pulling in bitterly cold air, and we would be having a beast from the east sort of snow. However, the high pressure sort of peters out and doesn't really maintain its strength, and we go into a sort of a cold zonality where it's generally cool, not probably cold enough for snow, widespread snow, but cold enough over hills and it's further north. And we maintain sort of a westerly flow, so be quite unsettled, but pretty cool and cold at the same time. And by the end of the run, the jet stream far to our south, little pockets of higher pressure, but nothing really going to block out the milder temperatures coming off the Atlantic. And you can see we're very close to tapping into bitterly cold air, but not quite there. So it just shows you there is still potential coming out. On all of the models are showing potential. Now, if we have a look at we're going to have a look at the GFS, but this time we're going to have a look at the upper airs, 10 HPA. Now, we've had the sun stratospheric warming, you can see it's starting to cool down again. It's not going to cool down that much, but we're starting to see signs there could be a second, and I mean a second, sudden stratospheric warming. Now, I mean, I don't know a lot about what would happen with a second sudden stratospheric warming. I don't know whether it would I'm assuming it would maintain the blocking, but to be honest, I'm not quite sure. It's going to be very interesting to see what happens with that. You can see the polar vortex is very weak and stretched out, even as it does recover from the current sun's stratospheric warming. It starts to regain some strength when we see still quite warm temperatures over Siberia. It diminishes before coming back with a vengeance, getting to around -5, -10 degrees, which is sudden stratospheric warming levels, and it starts to push up against the polar vortex. Big warming coming over Siberia. This would be another major sudden stratospheric warming, and by the end of the run, it's about to demolish the polar vortex by the 24th of January. So 2 sudden stratospheric warmings in about 3 weeks. That would be incredible, and I've never seen that before. And there are definitely hints that there's going to be further reversal of the winds, but I hadn't seen it suggested until I saw this run that there could be another major sudden stratospheric warming. So very interesting model runs from this. Very interesting to see whether if this sort of blocking patterns coming from these sun stratospheric warmings make it down to the level we could be seeing very sustained blocking for the foreseeable future. I don't really know what that would entail. To be very interesting to see what happens with this. We'll now have a look at the UK Met Office run, which only runs out to 144 hours, as the UK Met does restrict who gets to access their models. So we can only look at the pressure patterns. So we'll run through that. And the interesting thing by 144 hours is this high pressure north is pretty strong. We do start to put in a quite cold northeasterly wind with quite a cold pool just to our east. And it's starting to block out the Atlantic. Now, the UK Met is probably the most reliable model, along with the ECMWF, for medium range. So this sort of time range is probably the most reliable model. We'll look at the ECMWF last. But you can see it's quite a cold solution, very mild conditions. I'm really only looking at maybe Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, and maybe a bit of Wednesday before cold air dips in overnight into Thursday. From the northeast, and if this high pressure strengthens, then you can see there is some amplification in the jet streams and ridging further north. This combined with the sun's stratospheric warming, this could be the start of quite a major blocking pattern. But again, it's just something you have to look out for. You can see there is some blocking starting to come through the atmosphere down to the troposphere, and we'll see in other runs that this area of high pressure just over North Pole is going to play potentially quite a significant role in our weather conditions in the longer term, so day 10 and beyond. But we'll look at that on. That's more one for the GFS, however. GFS doesn't quite connect to it, unfortunately. We're going to have a look at the GM run. And the GM run, very similar pattern to all the other models, of course, and the short range. We do start to put in that brief northerly wind. We do start to build out that high pressure, but it does get toppled by this area of low pressure. Now, with the UK Met, you saw there's much more amplification, little ripples in the jet stream. There's only one here, which is the little ridge over the top of us, and this area of low pressure is much deeper. So if we did follow the UK Met version, it's more likely that that block to our north would be sustained. However, on the GEM model, it gets pushed down. And you can see to the north, we actually start to see that area of high pressure. That's building, and if it can combine with this ridge, we would start to put in a bitterly cold northeasterly wind. Now, I am clutching at straws with that, of course, because it's got a long way to get there. But as we get towards day 10, you see high pressure ridging towards Greenland, and lower pressure sinking down through Scandinavia. And if we could just run this on another couple of days, we could be plunged into the absolute freezer with warmer temperatures going towards Greenland, blocking area of high pressure, combining with this block over the North Pole, probably from the southern stratospheric warming, and pulling down a bitterly cold north to northeasterly wind all the way from the North Pole to Siberia. So it would be very cold conditions indeed with that, if we could run it on. But again, that's beyond day 10. So the models are putting out things that could bring us very cold, but nothing really at the moment in the reliable time frame. If we finally have a look at the ECMWF, so the ECMWF again has very similar patterns. It does build that block up to our north, but again it's got a bit more strength in the Atlantic, so it's going to get toppled. But the ridge to our north remains there, although it doesn't influence us that much, and it generally blocks out the Atlantic. For coming towards day 10, we see more amplification in the jet stream, and you start to see that area of high pressure to our north there. I'll run this through over the North Pole view. Deep cold to our northeast. And you can see that there, deep cold. Not what we've really had in the last couple of weeks. We've been tapping into cool air, but not deep cold. And then a big ridge is heading straight towards Greenland. And by day 10, we've got a big block heading straight towards Greenland and deep cold air coming in from the northeast. Now, if we run by that, we are pulling our air in from the northeast. Now, it's come quite a long way as the block is not made its way all the way up to Greenland yet. So it's kind of quite curvy isobars. But if we pulled that straight down through Scandinavia, we would be pulling in a bitterly cold, and I mean bitterly cold, easterly wind. Be colder than the beast for these, just because we're in mid-January. Tend to be the coldest time of the year. Instead of late February, early March, where the sun's a lot stronger, raising those temperatures up a little bit. That would be bitterly cold there. So all the models are showing potential for bitterly cold conditions in the longer term. But again, that's just something we would expect with the sun's stratospheric warming. We just really need to start to see that consolidate more into the 10-day time frame. So we want to see these dark blues coming over the top of the UK around 168, 192, 216 hours before we can say we've actually got a real chance of getting it. At the moment, it's just really prospects, and that is reflected by the ensemble chart. As you see, this precipitation and temperature ensemble chart for London. You can see it's generally going milder, but it's not going very mild. So we're having a little bit of a zonal sine wave there, quite briefly, before it generally cools down again. And you see some ensemble members going very cold. Anything below that -10 is bringing those deep blue colours in from the northeast. And then a lot of going between -5 and -10, and some going quite sustained as well. But then again, others going quite mild and warm. So it's a big varying trend with this. It's difficult to really see what they're all showing because, remember, some of these milder ensemble members could just be showing high pressure slightly changing its orientation, bringing in a southerly wind, for example, when it's showing a very similar pattern to one that's going bitterly cold, just generally because of the orientation of high pressure. So although they've got polar opposites for their temperatures, they could actually be having very similar patterns. So it's just something we really need to keep an eye on coming in. It generally has cooled down in the 10-day time frame, and I expect it to cool down a bit further. Looking at what charts we have at the moment, it does look like it's going to be going colder towards the 18th to 20th of January. But whether it goes bitterly cold is yet to be known yet. We just really need to see that come up in the weather charts within the 10-day time frame, which it's not at the moment. Just the signals really. Precipitation is generally it's quite a lot of precipitation around. Nothing huge, showing stormy conditions or massive zonality, but generally quite low pressure dominated. So it does look like even though it's turning colder, there will be a lot more precipitation around, unlike what we've got now, where we've got quite cold conditions. However, the precipitation is quite scarce. Where those have seen precipitation recently have got a lot of snow, and have had snow. However, a lot of areas have actually remained snowless in precipitation and had very little precipitation in the last 2 weeks, even though it's been quite cold. It doesn't look like while it's going cold, it will probably be a lot more unsettled with that potentially. I mean, only potentially bringing substantial snowfall maybe in the future. It's just something we need to really keep an eye on with the sun's stratospheric warming. I can guarantee you it will literally flick on like a switch in about a couple model runs, when one day it will go from just hinting at something cold or something or the weather or whatever weather type we're going to get come mid to end of January, it will resolve very quickly, simply because it'll be very uncertain. And then as soon as the blocking actually gets down into the troposphere, which it hasn't at the moment, we'll get a very clear picture of what's going to happen. Because at the moment, the models are trying to predict different things before they've happened. So we've had the southern stratospheric warming, the zonal winds have reversed, and it has to predict from there what's going to happen as it goes down the atmosphere. But as it goes down the layers in the atmosphere, in actual observations, we can see in the troposphere blocking start to come through, then the models will see it a lot better. So that's just what I think is going to happen in general, and hopefully that will probably happen over the next week. I suspect we'll start to have a very clear picture of what we're looking at towards the end of January, whether the sun's stratospheric warming is going to be a bust, or whether it's going to be, or at least a bust in January, or whether we're going to see some colder conditions. Generally, it doesn't look particularly zonal and particularly westerly, so whether we do see significant blocking from the sun's stratospheric warming, I don't suspect it's going to go very mild. It's going to probably be a quite cold January, and I know the CET is, I think, is negative about 2 degrees at the moment. I suspect it will rise up to more around average with this milder patch. But by the end of January, if we could continue these colder than average temperatures, we could be seeing a colder than average January for the first time in many, many years. So anyway, thanks for watching. Hope you enjoyed. Subscribe and I'll see you again for another video soon.